My parents punished me because my brother had no friends, so he took it upon himself to prove why he had none, and they still sided with him. So I had to resort to drastic measures to finally get through to them, and it did not go as expected. My parents salivate on the ground my brother walks on, and today I'm sharing how karma finally caught up with them at my wedding. Growing up, there were two sets of rules, one for my brother and one for me. All he had to do was say the words, "Lily did," followed by something I supposedly did wrong, and I'd be punished immediately. No questions were asked, and I'd be immediately bent over my parents' knee and disciplined. Sometimes they did it so hard it hurt to walk. Once when I was 7, he told our parents I had broken one of his model airplanes. I was disciplined and sent to my room without dinner, despite the fact that I had been at a friend's house all afternoon. The worst part was that if he did something wrong, I would be the one to get punished too. If I caught him red-handed, I'd get in trouble for not minding my own business. Family outings were always to places he wanted to go, even during events meant to celebrate me. My high school graduation dinner, we went to his favorite seafood restaurant despite knowing I'm allergic to shellfish. "You can order a salad," my dad suggested. And as my brother got older, I missed the days where he ignored me or just acted entitled, because it wasn't long before I was covered in bruises from becoming his personal punching bag. But everything changed in middle school. His friends gradually disappeared, either moved away or realized what a jerk he was. I only discovered my brother had become a social outcast because we attended the same school. One day during lunch, I overheard some kids from his grade talking about him. "Gosh, Mosky is such a nightmare. Did you hear how he made fun of Mr. Peterson's dead daughter yesterday?" I, on the other hand, was generally well liked. I wasn't the most popular girl, but I had genuine friends who enjoyed my company. Once he noticed this difference, I somehow became even more of his constant target. He started making up elaborate stories about me to get me grounded. My parents started saying things like, "Your brother says those kids are troublemakers," or "Why can't you be happy staying home like your brother?" And of course, when I told them he was wrong, they'd hit me with the "he's older and knows better." The only thing that saved me from complete isolation was my network of cousins who lived nearby. And one day, I finally came clean. They invited me to join them for a mall trip, and while we were away from my parents, I took advantage of the situation. My younger self bluntly admitted I couldn't go, because my parents banned me from having friends since my brother couldn't keep any. This comment spread through the family grapevine like wildfire, and apparently, my aunts and uncles confronted my parents about it later. "Is it true you're punishing Lily because Mosky doesn't have friends?" my Aunt Sarah asked my mother. I got punished for lying and grounded for weeks, but after that, something shifted. My parents eased up slightly on the restrictions, but the damage to their perfect family image couldn't be reversed. And because everyone now knew about my brother's social failures, he switched schools. My parents immediately agreed despite the higher tuition and longer commute, but still, he never forgave me for exposing him. If anything, his mistreatment intensified. But it wasn't just him anymore. Him and his new friends would come over and bully me together. They'd make comments about my appearance, hide my belongings, or deliberately exclude me from conversations. Once they even put salt in my water glass and laughed hysterically when I spit it out. My mom just smiled indulgently, saying, "Boys will be boys, sweetie. They're just having fun." My cousins became my closest allies, because my parents treated them 100 times better than me. My cousin Jocelyn especially became like the sister I never had. Her house was the only place I could experience what a normal family dynamic felt like. Pretty much everything stayed the same for a while after that, until I turned 16 and got my first boyfriend, because for some reason my parents insisted on meeting him, despite my reluctance. "We have to make sure he's good enough for our little girl," my dad said. And maybe in a world where I actually believed he cared, this would be touching. But my boyfriend wanted to meet them, so one day I gave in, and he came over. And I found out my brother was even worse than I thought, because during the visit, my boyfriend Tyler found me in a panic. He told me my brother had cornered him alone in the kitchen, wearing barely there shorts and no shirt, batting his eyelashes while trash-talking me and suggesting they hang out sometime. My boyfriend was completely creeped out and immediately found me to escape the situation. "Meg, I don't want to freak you out, but your brother just hit on me," he whispered, eyes wide with confusion. "He said I was wasting my time with you and that he could show me a better time." Then he, touched my arm and winked. It was super uncomfortable. My eyes went so wide I thought they were going to pop out of my head. I still can't wrap my head around what happened next. My brother told my parents a completely different story, claiming my boyfriend had made inappropriate advances toward him, but he reluctantly declined out of loyalty to me. 3 guesses who my parents believed without question? "How dare you bring that predator into our home?" my mother shrieked that evening. "Your brother was so upset he could barely tell us what happened." "But that's not what happened at all," I protested. "Tyler wouldn't do that." "Are you calling your brother a liar?" my father demanded, fist pounding the table. "He was in tears, Lily. Tears. Here's the thing. While my boyfriend wasn't perfect, I believed him instantly for one simple reason. My brother was not exactly the catch he thought he was. My parents and brother were all significantly overweight. My parents showed love through excessive food, which mostly went to him. While I've always been naturally thin, partly because food deprivation was a common punishment for me. I'm not saying appearance matters more than personality, but considering my brother's entitled attitude and awful behavior, even my insecure teenage self couldn't imagine my boyfriend would risk our relationship for someone like him. My parents banned me from seeing that horrible boy anyway. I tried dating in secret, but it was impossible to maintain with their constant monitoring, and we eventually broke up. Tyler refused to come anywhere near my house again, telling friends at school that my family was creepy as hell. The exact same scenario happened with my next boyfriend. My brother made unwanted advances, got rejected, then claimed victimhood. When I pointed out the pattern, my parents decided I simply had terrible judgment in men and kept choosing predatory boys. After that, I gave up on relationships in high school. I earned a reputation for casual hookups because I'd make out with guys but refused to date them officially. Thankfully, this never got back to my family. I'd tell the guys up front, "I can't bring you home and we can't be seen together too much. My family is complicated." Most were fine with this arrangement, and it gave me some semblance semblance of a normal teenage experience. During this time, my brother proudly paraded around his one and only boyfriend, whom my parents treated like royalty, while constantly asking why I couldn't find someone respectable like him. They'd invite him for dinner constantly, buy him small gifts, and include him in family photos. When the guy suddenly stopped coming around, the narrative immediately shifted to him being a manipulative jerk who took advantage of my poor brother. I later found out from a mutual acquaintance that the boyfriend had caught my brother trying to flirt with his college roommate and dumped him immediately. The double standards continued in every aspect of life. My brother had generous spending money and lenient curfews, while I was restricted and monitored. When I pointed out the unfairness, my parents would say, "He's older." But when I reached his age, nothing changed. When I called them out again, they'd either deny ever making the age argument or claim I simply couldn't be trusted like he could. When my brother graduated high school, he got accepted to a mediocre college with no scholarships or honors. My parents made an enormous celebration with catered food, decorations, and even hired a photographer. "We're so proud of you, son," they gushed. The first in our family to attend university. They promised to cover all his expenses, including a private apartment off campus because dorms aren't conducive to academic excellence. I was silently relieved he'd be moving away, but it barely improved my situation since he came home most weekends and somehow always managed to notice things missing from my room or create other problems. About a year later, my mom sat me down for a serious talk about my upcoming graduation. She explained that since they were funding my brother's education, they couldn't afford mine, suggesting I should start working immediately after graduation and wait until he finished college to see if they could help me. Oh, and if I wanted to continue living at home, I'd need to pay rent, utilities, and buy all my own necessities. "We just want you to learn responsibility," she said with that fake concerned expression she'd perfected. "Mosky is pursuing higher education, but you've always been more practically minded." When I mentioned student loans, she replied, "Well, we care about your future too much to let you make poor financial decisions. We'll decide if a college is worth going into debt for." They never mentioned scholarships. They had no idea what my grades were and never believed in my abilities anyway. I simply responded with a calm, "Okay." My mom seemed shocked by my lack of reaction and started crying, probably hoping I'd throw a tantrum so they could justify never supporting my education. The truth is, after years of their terrible parenting, I never expected their help. I'd been secretly preparing for college independently, using all those lonely hours at home to study relentlessly. College represented my only escape route. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Peterson, was the first adult who seemed to actually see my potential. She helped me navigate applications, scholarships, and financial aid forms without parental involvement. When graduation approached, I worked harder than ever and secured a full scholarship to a solid state university with a good program. Knowing my brother would try to sabotage this through my parents, I announced my acceptance on social media simultaneously, while telling them in person, even tactically thanking them in the post. So grateful for my parents' support as I head to state university this fall on a full academic scholarship. This prevented them from blocking me from going without explaining why to our extended family. Initially, they seemed proud and boasted about it. Then my brother got to them, and suddenly they started asking if I was sure I wanted to go, letting slip that my brother was struggling academically, and since he was naturally smarter with better judgment, I would obviously fail miserably. I stood my ground, and they reluctantly accepted they couldn't stop me without looking terrible to everyone who had congratulated me online. College became my salvation. I visited during holidays but could legitimately use financial limitations as an excuse to limit contact. During this time, my brother dropped out of college, moved back home without paying a cent in rent or bills, and got hired at my mom's workplace through her connections, which they presented as some incredible achievement. This is where the story gets interesting. I met my husband during junior year in an economics class. He sat next to me on the first day and immediately impressed me with his confidence and wit. When the professor made a terrible joke, he leaned over and whispered, "I think we're paying tuition for dad jokes now," making me laugh for the first time in weeks. He's my complete opposite in handling conflict. Where I'm non-confrontational and usually think of perfect comebacks hours later while lying awake at night, he's quick-witted and never hesitates to stand up for himself. While I cry when angry, he becomes icily calm and strategic. If he doesn't immediately respond to an insult, you should worry. It means he's planning something more calculated than a simple retort. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant near campus. When the waiter accidentally spilled water on the table, I immediately apologized out of habit, even though it wasn't my fault. My future husband noticed this and gently said, "You don't need to apologize for things that aren't your fault." That simple statement hit me like a revelation. We talked for hours that night, and I found myself sharing details about my family that I'd never told anyone. "That's not normal," he said firmly when I described my childhood. "That's abuse, Lily. You deserve better." When we decided to get married after dating for 2 years, we agreed to keep the ceremony modest since we wanted to splurge on a dream European honeymoon instead. Since his family was scattered nationwide while mine was concentrated in my hometown, where we lived about 90 minutes away, we chose to hold the wedding there. After sending engagement announcements, my parents demanded to meet my fiancé. I reluctantly agreed but promised myself I'd never leave him alone with my brother. Hilariously, my husband was thrilled about the meeting. He'd heard so many stories about my family's treatment of me that he was practically giddy with anticipation. He even purchased a high-quality voice recorder to secretly document whatever nonsense they might try. He went alone to meet them despite my reservations. "Trust me," he said, kissing my forehead. "I can handle them." He returned absolutely ecstatic. "Babe, you won't believe what they proposed. We can absolutely destroy them with this," he said, barely containing his excitement. According to the recording he played me, my parents and brother had sat him down and, after some obligatory complaints about my poor judgment, offered to contribute financially to our wedding on one outrageous condition. My brother would walk down the aisle before me, wearing a tuxedo identical to the groom's, and would be featured prominently in the wedding photos and even have his own special cake. "We're willing to help with the wedding costs," my mother's voice said on the recording, "but Mosky has always dreamed of being in a wedding. It's not proper for a younger sibling to marry first," my father added, "so this would give him the experience he deserves." My brother's voice chimed in. "I've even picked out the tux I want. It should match yours exactly so we look like a matched set in photos." My husband's perspective, when they suggested this lunacy like it was some generous gift, my brain literally short-circuited. I had a dozen insults ready to launch, but something stopped me. A little voice whispered, "Play along and make them pay." So I told them I needed to consult with my fiancé while secretly planning our counterattack. Rather than falling into depression over this final betrayal, my husband's enthusiasm for revenge energized me. We spent days brainstorming options, from outlandish schemes to more practical approaches. We eventually consulted his level-headed brother, who talked us out of our more legally questionable ideas and helped us settle on the perfect plan. My husband returned to my parents alone, acting conflicted. He told them he'd tested the waters with me and didn't think I'd agree to their proposal. However, he personally saw no issue and wanted to keep the family peace. He cleverly suggested that surprising me on the wedding day might work since I hate confrontation and wouldn't cause a scene in front of guests, especially if they helped pay for the wedding, making me feel obligated to comply. The brilliance came next. He convinced them that due to my trust issues from past relationships, using their own accusations against me, I frequently checked his phone and monitored his communications. Therefore, nothing about their brother walking down the aisle plan could ever be in writing. All discussions would have to happen in person at their house. "She gets very paranoid and reads all my texts and emails," he explained. "It's just easier if we keep this arrangement verbal. She'd be devastated if she found out before the wedding." My mom nodded sympathetically. Mosky's ex was the same way. So controlling. We understand completely. Thus began months of elaborate deception where my parents and brother thought they were manipulating me, while we milked them financially. My parents insisted on controlling wedding details, but my husband persuaded them to let me have small victories on things like songs and colors to keep me manageable. Here's how we executed our scheme. When selecting catering options, we'd initially agree to budget-friendly choices. Then my husband would secretly take my brother for a tasting, sigh dramatically, and say, "Too bad we can't get the premium package. We don't want to take advantage of your parents' generosity." On cue, my brother would demand my parents upgrade us to the most expensive option. They'd then generously offer to cover the premium package as a surprise. We repeated this strategy with the photographer, flowers, venue upgrades, everything. My husband would craft these scenarios perfectly, playing on my brother's insecurities and my parents' obsession with appearances. He'd mention how unfortunate it was that we couldn't afford the luxury options, knowing my brother would immediately want the best for himself. The only hiccup came with the wedding dress when my mother tried to force me into a hideous gown that wouldn't flatter me. She texted me about it, breaking their no written evidence rule, so I had to genuinely refuse. My brother suggested they accidentally damage my preferred dress, so I'd have to wear their choice. My husband pretended to love this idea. Throughout this time, my brother did make several clumsy attempts to flirt with my fiancé, who played along just enough to keep our con going, acting torn between loyalty to me and attraction to my brother. We ended up with an extravagant wedding that would have been completely beyond our means, all funded by my parents. We called it back payments for emotional damages. The venue was upgraded to include fairy lights and extra florals. The menu featured premium options like filet mignon and lobster, and the bar was fully stocked with top-shelf liquor. On our wedding day, the plan my family had secretly arranged was for my brother to arrive right when everyone was seated, when the bride typically makes her entrance. He would walk down the aisle in his tuxedo before I even realized what was happening, making it too late for me to object. We hired professional security but kept them initially discreet. Just a woman checking names at the entrance. Only after my parents were seated did we position our intimidating male security guard at the door with specific instructions not to admit my brother under any circumstances. When it was time for the ceremony to begin, my dad received a text that my brother was nearly there. He signaled my bridesmaids to start without conferring with me, and positioned himself at the entrance to walk me down the aisle. As the bridal music began playing, the doors opened, and I appeared in my gown. My dad looked utterly shocked to see me instead of my brother. His face drained of color, and his mouth actually fell open. He frantically looked behind me but couldn't see what was happening at the venue entrance. His phone started ringing. It was my brother, and he mumbled, "Something came up," before abandoning me at the altar to answer it. The guests gasped in confusion. A friend who was in on our plan loudly asked what happened. I tearfully said, "He told me it wasn't supposed to be me walking," which wasn't entirely acting. I was genuinely hurt despite anticipating this behavior. My friend loudly repeated, "What did he mean it shouldn't be you?" Ensuring everyone heard, then announced she'd go check the commotion, racing off to witness the chaos. My mother eventually followed, leaving me standing alone. My father-in-law immediately rushed over and took my arm. We'd prepared him for this possibility. "I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. His obvious concern made me smile through my tears. I walked down the aisle amid whispers and confusion, with several guests leaving to investigate. The ceremony proceeded perfectly once I reached my soon-to-be husband. Throughout the reception, people kept disappearing and returning with shocked expressions, but no one dared tell me what was happening. From multiple accounts gathered afterward, here's what happened. My brother arrived wearing a tuxedo identical to my husband's, complete with the same boutonniere and pocket square. Our security guard refused him entry, explaining there was already a wedding in progress with the bride present. My dad threatened to call police, claiming the guard wasn't authorized. The guard calmly agreed to let authorities sort it out, knowing it would be too late to disrupt our ceremony. My friend arrived, creating a scene and stalling by loudly demanding explanations. What's going on? Why is the father of the bride out here instead of walking his daughter down the aisle? My mother joined, followed by curious guests. Their plan exposed, my parents attempted damage control as horrified witnesses berated them. When they blamed my husband for orchestrating everything, he was summoned outside. My husband put on his most bewildered expression and denied any knowledge of such a plan. What are you talking about? Why would I want anyone else walking down the aisle at my wedding? When they insisted he had agreed to it, he demanded proof, which of course they couldn't provide since all our text exchanges were about normal wedding details. When they claimed, "But you told us not to text about it," he laughed and said, "How convenient that there's no evidence of this ridiculous accusation." My brother had a complete meltdown, literally sitting on the ground crying and screaming like a toddler. It was supposed to be my day too. He promised me. My mom was sobbing while my dad's face cycled between rage purple and panic white. Some guests even recorded portions of the confrontation on their phones. Security and other guests had to physically restrain my dad when he lunged toward my husband. "You lying piece of garbage," my father reportedly shouted. "You said she wouldn't make a scene." "I never agreed to any of this," my husband responded calmly. "And I find it disturbing that you apparently planned to hijack our wedding without my fiancé's knowledge or consent." No one at the wedding believed their story. They kept demanding explanations. Why would the groom agree to this? Why is there no proof? Why would you want your son to hijack your daughter's wedding? They had no answers and were eventually forced to leave, with my dad literally dragging my screaming brother off the ground. Everyone at the reception spared me the details, allowing us to enjoy our extravagant celebration. We danced, cut our beautiful cake, and soaked in the love from everyone who truly cared about us. Afterward, my parents and brother bombarded me with calls, which I ignored on my husband's advice to maintain a paper trail. My brother eventually sent unhinged text messages blaming me for humiliating him, calling my husband a two-faced snake who fooled them for months, and claiming my husband was secretly cheating with him. "Your husband has been leading me on for months," one message read. "He told me he was only marrying you as a cover. Ask him about our private tastings." My brilliant husband compiled screenshots of their harassment, call logs, and threatening messages they sent him, then shared everything in our extended family group chat. He maintained his innocence and publicly begged my family to help stop the harassment that was ruining our honeymoon. He even requested they not share our location to prevent my brother from showing up, claiming my husband had somehow agreed to sleep with him in our honeymoon suite. My extended family assured us they'd handle the situation, and we've had peace since then. My aunt later told me she'd had a come to Jesus conversation with my parents about their behavior throughout my life. While I would have preferred having loving family support at my wedding, for once in my life they not only failed to ruin something important to me, I actually got my revenge. FAQ: why did they treat me this way? I've wondered this my entire life. My best guess is that I was an unplanned pregnancy. They tried for years to have my brother, so he was their miracle baby. Given our small age gap, I think I was an unexpected surprise they weren't prepared for financially or emotionally. But honestly, no reason would justify their behavior. Did they really think this would work? My husband and I suspect they never actually intended to go through with it. My brother probably threw a tantrum about me getting married when he can barely get dates, and they made this ridiculous proposal expecting rejection. They could then look supportive to my brother while having an excuse not to contribute financially. When my husband unexpectedly agreed, they were trapped in their own scheme.